All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SFN Startup Financial News. Today is April 10th, 2018. This is episode 195. Let's get right into today's show with what you need to know. First, it was a great day for markets here in the U.S. All the major indexes are up. Mark Zuckerberg is testifying before Congress today. Elon Musk has called out Goldman Sachs after a negative report on Tesla surfaced. Next, let's get into today's top headlines. First, Theranos has laid off most of its workforce in an inevitable move towards bankruptcy. CNBC reports that Mark Zuckerberg will win by keeping focus away from Facebook's business model with regards to his congressional testimony today. A new version of Spotify's free plan is reportedly in the works and expected to launch later this year. Facebook has yet again stolen tech headlines, not only today, but for the beginning of this week, and we'll be doing a special show today covering some Facebook-oriented stories. And finally, Uber has rolled out a redesigned app for drivers. How are your markets performing? The Dow is up 1.79%, the S&P 500 is up 1.67%, and the NASDAQ is up 2.07%. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are trying something new here at Startup Financial News today. We are live streaming on YouTube today using a software known as OBS in a move that we hope brings us closer to really turning Startup Financial News into potentially even your 24/7 source for breaking entrepreneurial news, something that hasn't been done yet, something that nobody is focusing on, and, a lot is going on with live streaming with regards to news. But there's really no company out there that has decided to orient themselves to this new workforce. And when I say this new workforce, folks, in 2007, I believe it was, 16% of the workforce identified as entrepreneurs, freelancers, or gig workers. That number reported in the Wall Street Journal at the end of 2017 was reportedly up to 34%. Which means we now have more than a third of individuals in this country who classify as a self-starter, an entrepreneur, a freelancer, or a gig worker. And that's what I believe we're going to end up doing with Startup Financial News. Is we're going to make this your home for the news that you need and distribute you that news in ways that's not only easy for you to consume, but that you can interact with. Right, and for those of you that are just joining us on Startup Financial News, if you're not someone that's been with us for some time now, and you're just kind of getting into the show, all we've ever tried to do here at Startup Financial News and why it started as a podcast is to not bullshit you. It's to not give you the same headlines that you could read in tech and startup outlets, because a lot of that stuff is controlled. What we do here at Startup Financial News is myself as an entrepreneur, along with the team here, give you the insight, as well as the guests that come on the show, the experience, the knowledge, and the know-how to understand what these stories and what this news means for us as entrepreneurs and how we can better run our business by understanding this news. So again, today we are testing a live streaming show, I guess, via OBS, using OBS as our software and YouTube as our platform this time. If you remember, we were live streaming back in February using a Mevo camera on Facebook Live, and that went well. We had a whole bunch of viewers on there, and we have since stopped because we've been doing some testing with the website. We've been doing some testing with newsletters, and now this testing, what we're trying to do is figure out how we can make a very interactive show by using live streaming, right? Because a podcast is great because it can be recorded and distributed to so many people around the globe. But live streaming is amazing because we can actually chat with you folks while we put these shows out there. And so we're a little ways away from actually going ahead and doing that, but we are testing it today. And, we like to keep all of our listeners informed on what's going on with the podcast. And, we've been throwing these teasers out there as to how we're growing, but we want you to let you know that we're working hard to deliver you this entrepreneurial news in new methods. So now that we have the housekeeping stuff out of the way, what we're going to do on today's show, we had another light news day, And, before I even get into that, a big thank you to Mike Ferguson and Julian Correa of Nightspeed Moving, who were on the show yesterday. Folks, that was a phenomenal episode. Those two gave great tips on how important it is for entrepreneurs to network and attend industry conferences and become players in their space. And so if you didn't get a chance to hear that, just go. It's episode 194. Totally worth your time. And especially if you're one of those more introverted entrepreneurs who fears getting out there, getting in front of people and speaking to people, give that episode a listen, folks. Anyway, so what we are doing is we are covering 2 Facebook stories that came across the Startup Financial news desk earlier this year. So those stories, we have one from The Guardian. Former Facebook executive says social media is ripping society apart. And our second story, also from The Guardian, our minds can be hijacked. The tech insiders who fear a smartphone dystopia. So folks, why are we covering these stories today? What's so special about these 2 stories and about Facebook this week in particular that they deserve this much attention? Well, folks, for a while here at Startup Financial News, for a while, we have been discussing how social media platforms have become fads. They've become fads, and we got made fun of plenty of times for our predictions on Facebook and Facebook's platform and how the company, although they've made smart moves through acquisitions, the company's platform really isn't all it's cracked up to be. There's a lot that's wrong with it. There's a lot that's, creating these addictive habits for their users, to where social media, in another report, was stated to be more addictive than the nicotine in cigarettes. Right, and so what we have going on here is we have these massive platforms, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, these massive platforms that have opened the floodgates for so many people to build their businesses through advertising, through connecting with people, right? So many of us rely as entrepreneurs, so many of us as startups rely on Facebook ads, rely on putting our brand story out on Instagram, rely on potentially communicating with our customers via Snapchat. And so remember, folks, what we do here on the show is we try and stay away as much as we can from anything political, and we don't do any reporting for the consumer or the individual. We report here for the entrepreneur and how these stories affect you. And so what's going on with Zuckerberg in Congress this week? All his testimony and talking about this Cambridge Analytica stuff that's going on, and the potential Russia hacking, and having a show face for Congress. It's important, okay? It's important on a society level. It's important on a consumer level. But for us as startup owners and entrepreneurs, what has more merit is paying attention to what's actually going on with Facebook and social media in general, because this is stuff that we need to be aware of. So we're taking these 2 stories from The Guardian. This former Facebook executive, his name is Chamath Palihapitiya. Sorry if I said that wrong. And he was the former vice president of user growth over at Facebook, okay? And the story in its subtitle says that, quote, he expressed regret for his part in building tools that destroy the social fabric of how society works. Right, and so even though that's important on a number of levels, right, being concerned about how our children use Facebook, being concerned about how we use Facebook, being concerned about how much time is actually dedicated to these platforms, and being, aware that things like cyberbullying do exist, et cetera, even though all those things are important, what's important for the entrepreneur to realize is that, folks, a lot of people are starting to recognize the fact that these social media platforms perhaps are not the healthiest way to spend their time, right? That's the takeaway here. And so I said this on a few shows so far, but it's so important for today's entrepreneurs and startup founders to know this, that, folks, if Facebook falls out of favor any more than it already has, there's a good chance that not only your ad's not going to be converting, but we're seeing today that Facebook doesn't have the most ethical practices. Who knows? Who knows if they're actually reporting the best analytics to us when we're paying for an ad? I know I sound crazy for saying that, and I'm not making any allegations. I'm not saying anything like that, but I'm saying, look, these companies are not clean companies. They're corporations. Right? That's being proven today. That's being proven right now. We have Zuckerberg having to testify. The company in a hell of a lot of hot water for a lot of crap that they've done over the years. It's finally catching up to them. Now, will Zuckerberg and Facebook be fine? Sure. Sure they will. No question about that. They have friends in high places. They're set. But the real question is, will we be fine? The entrepreneurs, will we be fine? Honestly, how many of you listening or watching use Facebook to promote your brand? How many of you use Facebook ads to get new customers? How many of you use Facebook in general? I want to try something here. Think back to a time 5 years ago, 4 years ago. How many likes your posts on Facebook were getting? Make a post today. See how many likes it gets. Folks, I can tell you firsthand. I got about 1,000 friends on Facebook. 4 years ago, I'd put a post. I could get 80 likes, 100 likes. Now I put a post up. I'm lucky if I get 4. 4. And if that doesn't tell you something, about what's going on with Facebook and with social media in general, then let me spell it out for you. The problem is, folks, that users are falling out of favor with the platform itself. We've been seeing this happen for quite some time. And so there's no question about it that Facebook, just like we have in the CNBC story today that came out, where an analyst said that Zuckerberg and Facebook would be fine in this testimony if they shift the focus away from their business model. You have to wonder what that means. You have to genuinely wonder what that means. Why would that even be a headline in CNBC? Right? Well, if we think about this a little bit critically, right? We use our critical thinking skills here. What that probably means is that since the platform itself has fallen out of favor with users, as we're proving just by doing this little test of putting a post out, Facebook has to make money. Facebook has to grow. How much money is being made with our data? If you don't believe it's the bulk of their revenue, then you're wrong. So, again, there's a whole bunch of society things that we could worry about with that. There's a whole bunch of personal security things we could worry about. But again, Startup Financial News is a show for the entrepreneur. So what should you be doing in light of this? In light of this news, in light of these stories that we're covering coming out, in light of Zuckerberg testifying? Folks, you should be diversifying. You should be diversifying how and where you connect with your customers. You should be looking for alternative methods, much like we are here at Startup Financial News, by trying live streaming, by doing podcasting, by thinking about doing email newsletters, by launching a new website. And folks, actually an interesting story that came out yesterday that we didn't get a chance to cover, Netflix, one of the biggest tech stocks in the FANG group, as a matter of fact, purchased a billboard company. That's right, folks, a billboard company, which has to tell you something yet again. Let's think critically about how these stories tie into each other. If Netflix is acquiring a billboard company, do you think that there's smart people over there that perhaps said, hey, you know what? What's going on, with social media and people, these toxic environments, maybe, just maybe, we need to go back to some old ways of advertising. And not that it's old, because billboards are still being used. I believe Netflix is one of the biggest users of billboards in general. But this should signify at least a little something, right? Because as entrepreneurs, we never really get hard data to make decisions. If we did, it would be a much easier job than it is. right? But we don't always get that full data, so we have to analyze the trends. We have to analyze what could potentially be next, right? And so here's what we have to pay attention to. If Netflix is making a move like this, if Facebook is in this much hot water, if our Facebook posts are not getting as many likes as they used to, if our Facebook ads are not converting the way we want them to, perhaps our customer base is moving on, not just to a new platform, but perhaps to entirely new forms of being communicated with. And this is a great time to bring up our second story from The Guardian. A story titled, "Our Minds Can Be Hijacked. The Tech Insiders Who Fear a Smartphone Dystopia." Subheadline: Google, Twitter, and Facebook workers who helped make technology so addictive are disconnecting themselves from the internet. It's a story by Paul Lewis in The Guardian. And, look, I've read the story so many times because I'm fascinated by it. And, we've shared the link in the show before. I'll share it with you folks on the podcast today. Obviously, if you're watching the live stream, you can just Google search the story. There's the title. Again, let's think about what all this means. The people from Google, Twitter, and Facebook who made these tools so addictive are distancing themselves from them. Now, if that doesn't tell you or signal to you a trend, I don't know what does. Folks, this is how these things begin. This is what happens. You just start to hear little rumblings left and right about things that are going on. Oh, Facebook's in trouble. Oh, Netflix buys a billboard company. Oh, yeah, smartphones are too addictive. Oh, yeah, social media is bad for you. Oh, yeah, cyberbullying. It's all out there. But people aren't piecing it together, which is the entrepreneur's job, which is why you listen to Start Financial News. We're piecing it together for you. We're putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And the pieces of the puzzle, once you put it together, have this big red warning sign. This big red warning sign saying, watch out. Watch out. Customers are moving. Customers are moving. Folks, the goal with advertising, the goal with building a brand is to build a loyal customer base. And Facebook, since this show is mostly about Facebook today, Facebook was so great at that for so many years. Facebook put me out of business. You know what, folks? We're going to go into a little tangent here and Start Financial News, a little bit about your host, Julien Meyer's background. One of the most successful companies I ever ran was a company called College Stack. Some of the best years of my life. It was a paper coupon book business, and it was a cash cow. I loved it to death. Then along came Facebook and Facebook pages, and all of my business customers who were so great and so loyal to me started scratching their heads and saying, why would I pay $300 for a 2-month ad in your circular when I have Facebook and I have Facebook pages? I have a Facebook business page, they would say. So Facebook flat out put me, along with hundreds, if not thousands, of others in the print media space out of business. They did. And with good reason, okay? I'm not bitter about it. I'm not sour about it. I knew it was coming. Paper was falling out of style, but they took over that. They took over that building relationships with customers. They took over that being able to show an offer to 20,000 people, which is what I was doing with my coupon books. So they took that business. And so we all bought into it. As entrepreneurs, we said, fuck advertising. I'm not paying for that shit. I can build a great Facebook page and I can get 15,000 likes. Then I can sell them anything if I have 15,000 likes, right? But there was one little asterisk that none of us read. And that's that when we decided to go down that route, we signed our business lives away. We signed them over to Facebook. Our entire customer base, if you run a business like this, which a lot of you do, if your entire method of communicating with your customer base consists, let's say 60 or 80%, by keeping them informed on social media, you have to remember that you don't actually own that customer base. You don't own that 15,000 likes. You don't own those followers. Facebook, my friends, Facebook owns those followers. And when they start fucking up like they are now, right, with this addictive technology, with the former execs saying our minds can be hijacked and they fear a smartphone dystopia. And we get reports that social media is more addictive than cigarettes. And we get a former Facebook executive, right, this former vice president of user growth, that's saying that social media is ripping society apart. When you get these stories that are coming out, you have to really consider that point that Facebook owns your 15,000 followers of your page. And when they screw up like this, when they start to mess up and people start to turn away from the platform, or the platform itself starts to fall out of style because it is a fad, that they leave us screwed. We're fucked. They have all our data. They can sell that shit. But the rest of us that need to put messages out on Facebook, that need to communicate with that customer base that we've spent 5 years building, that rely on Facebook ads, but all the people have gone? It's a scary thing. And listen, folks, it hasn't happened yet. It's idiotic of me to say that that's happened. But it's not moronic to say that it is in the process of happening. Again, folks, please, try this. Try posting something on Facebook today. And then really think in your head, 3, 4 years ago, how many likes would that same post have gotten? Today's National Siblings Day. Try perhaps putting up a picture of you and your siblings. That should be pretty popular. I guarantee you'll be shocked by the number of people that are actually engaging with content on Facebook. Facebook wants us to believe it's a hell of a lot more, But we've seen, and we're seeing, as Zuckerberg himself has to testify in front of Congress, that this company, they don't give a shit about us. They give a hell of a lot of, they care a lot about making money, just like most corporations. And again, this is a New York show, so we don't care, fine. But we hate hypocrites. And we hate how much Facebook has told us over the years that they are shaping our future, that they're they're the way that we stay communicated with each other, when really all they're doing is building these tools that, again, this former Facebook executive has said are ripping society apart. And so again, the takeaway here for the entrepreneur, just like we always do on the show, the takeaway is that now is the time. And I will probably say this until I'm blue in the face on each episode or every other episode. You can trust me, that's a promise. What I'm going to continue to say is that you really have to start preparing for when the mass migration off of Facebook, and perhaps even the mass migration to delete social media, begins, that you have a fail-safe plan to make sure that you can still communicate with your customers. Right? In the past, it used to be every door direct mail. It used to be people like me with coupon books. Then it went to email newsletters. Then there was some text messaging in there. And then it went to social media. So there's probably going to be something else that emerges in the future. But that being said, until we see that, make sure that you're prepared for this. Make sure that you have ways to keep that loyal following that you've built on these platforms, and perhaps migrate them. We believe that that's the future here at Startup Financial News, and that's why we don't want to tie ourselves to Facebook Live. It's why we don't want to tie ourselves to YouTube Live. It's why we don't want to tie ourselves to any one platform, because, folks, think about what that entails for the entrepreneur. You as an entrepreneur are using another entrepreneur's, or another company's, if you will, another company's platform to build a following. You may think and feel that you own that following, but if you are on their platform, they own that. And that's what we all, as entrepreneurs, have to start moving away from. Because we cannot rely on these companies, as Facebook is proving this week. So, folks, that's our show for today. This has been episode 195 on this April 10th, 2018. I'm your host, Julien Meyer, and I'll be right back with you here tomorrow for another episode of SFN.